Hello everyone, Stealthy Sharon here, and today we're taking a look at the Humble Choice Bundle for June 2021. My process for this is that I play each game for roughly about an hour, then I tell you my thoughts on them, and ultimately if I feel they're worth your time. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to it. First up, we have Disjunction, a cyberpunk-themed mystery revolving around a synthetic superdrug, a radical human rights group, and a conspiracy-like cover-up. It has a pixel art style that I think does a good job to convey a cyberpunk aesthetic. The story itself seems to have a lot of lore that kinda lost me in the beginning. The game likes to tell you a lot of things through dialogue or newspaper clippings, instead of showing you in a better way. It allows you to understand the world a bit better, but it all feels like stuff that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. At the start, you play as a private investigator named Frank, and are tasked with finding out information as to how a wife's husband was wrongfully imprisoned. After you follow him for a bit, you take the role of Joe, a boxer with a cybernetic arm trying to reconcile with the loss of his daughter, who died due to mysterious circumstances. After that, well, that's as far as I got in my time with Disjunction. Reading off the store page, there is another character who I hear is a hacker. All of them have their own stories and playstyles. I could definitely see it with the boxer who I was building up to be a tank who could beat people into submission without needing to kill anyone. It felt fun and could change things up to give the player different challenges to overcome based on who they're playing as. At the beginning of each level, you could spend your skill points accordingly to define your playstyle so you're not locked into any one thing and are encouraged to experiment, probably with some builds being better for a particular level than others. As for the actual gameplay, I think it was serviceable to the point that it was enjoyable, but not amazing. The stealth aspect of the game is fairly simple, as you mainly just need to stay out of the enemy's sight, but occasionally you have to think of things like to move a body, or if you use your gun that might attract the attention of some other enemies. Personally, I didn't have an issue with the stealth in Disjunction, but I'm not really good at stealth games in general, so that might be why. Someone else looking for something more probably isn't going to find that here. One last thing to keep in mind is that this key is only for GOG, which kinda sucks, because I would have rather have it for Steam. But it's not a huge deal to have to deal with it on GOG. Just a heads up to anyone this might be a problem for. All in all, I liked what I played, and I probably would continue playing just to finish the story. Next we have Effie, an adventure game with platforming mechanics that seem reminiscent of older 3D platforming adventure games. It's set in a brightly colored fantasy world. The story starts with an old man, presumably the protagonist, telling his granddaughter, Effie, a fairy tale about a man named Galen, who is cursed with old age and has to go on a quest to rid the land of evil and reclaim his youth. In fact, throughout your playthrough, the old man acts as a narrator for Galen and the player's adventures throughout the land. I wish they had the granddaughter pipe in every now and again, because it didn't feel like he was telling a story after a while, and it was more just commenting on things the player saw. The story itself is really simple, and I feel a kid would find it more interesting. So, Galen gets cursed because he was lazy. He wants to revert this, so he has to find these elder protectors to give him back his youth, but he had to have a kind heart in order for them to do so. The elder protectors can't tell if he has a kind heart and says that he has to go on this quest to prove himself, which seems weird because if he has to do a quest to show that he has a kind heart, then it's not really altruistic anymore. After that, you get this shield that, by the way, is given to you under the notion that you have a pure heart. But I guess that's not the same thing. Anyway, the shield opens up more gameplay mechanics, which are fairly simple at best. The platforming is easy, and that's coming from someone who is absolutely horrible with platforming games. And the combat is pretty straightforward. As I continued to play, I unlocked the dash ability, which you could use to get close or away from enemies, so it seems like more complexity is introduced as you continue to play. Also, you could surf on the shield. but you can't really use it for anything other than traveling from point A to point B, which is fun and disappointing at the same time. I think I would only continue to play this if I was a kid, or if I was playing with a kid. I think there are better games in this genre to play. However, as it stands in this bundle though, I'd say it probably is worth a try. Paw 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 is a side-scroller beat-em-up game set in a world of animals. The kingdom of Paw Paw Paw, yep, that's the name, is living peacefully until a strange meteorite crashes into the castle, brainwashing the king. In his madness, he declares that all his subjects must wear pants or face the penalty. Which might be death, I'm not really sure. Anyway, as you could clearly tell, the story's not taking anything too seriously. It's completely ridiculous, and that's the point. I wouldn't go and say it's good story writing or anything, so you're definitely not playing this game for the story. But how is the actual gameplay? To be honest, I don't have much experience with this genre, so I'm not really sure how it compares to other games like it. I felt the combat was off. Not sure how to describe it well. It didn't feel fluid, but that might be because I wasn't used to the controls yet. That being said, I think it became a little too easy to spam attacks, especially with the botanist. Just make sure you dodge every now and again, and you're good. I also don't like the depth perception in these games because I find it hard to determine if my attack will line up or not, but that's just me and a gripe with the genre as a whole. There's an RPG mechanic to this game as well that lets you level up your characters to expand on their active abilities or power up their passive stats. Unfortunately, experience doesn't carry over to the other characters, so if you wanted to change characters later in your playthrough, then you'd probably need to grind them in the earlier stages to make them more viable. Different weapons, on the other hand, are shared between characters. It seems that each character can only equip one type of weapon, but it stores the weapons you find so that you could equip them to the appropriate characters later on. Also, the music is not great. I felt it didn't match the game at all, and after a while it was really grating to the ears. I had a slight headache when I was playing this game, and it only seemed to get worse by the time I was done. I'd say pass on this one. It's probably fun with friends, and if you have no other games to play together, then I guess sure, go for it. But just make sure you're listening to your own music when you do. The next game is Ikenfell, a 2D RPG with a tactical battle system. It takes place at a magic school named Ikenfell and its nearby surroundings. The art style, while simplistic, is very well done, in most cases bringing a certain charm to the world and characters within it. There were a couple NPCs that I had a little bit of hard time discerning, and probably could have helped with a few animation frames to distinguish them more. And in contrast to Paw Paw Paw, Ikenfell's music is really good. It brings a nostalgic feel that just complements the whole game. Moving on to the story, you play as Marit, a young girl searching for her sister. Her sister attends a prestigious magic school. However, recently, she hasn't been keeping in touch, and Marit wants to find out why. As you continue playing, you discover it's obviously more than just her sister forgetting to write, and something is going on at the school. So far, I felt this was enough to keep me invested in the story early on. In my playtime, I didn't really come across too many characters that played a major role besides Marit, but of the ones that were introduced, I wanted to know more about them. As stated earlier, Ikenfell has a tactical turn-based battle system. I think it was fun for the most part. I always like when there is a battle map element added to turn-based combat. You have to maneuver around to land your attacks or try to stay out of range. In Ikenfell, a timing mechanic is used in battle for your attacks and to defend against your enemies. I thought it was a bit difficult to pull off perfect timings, but that could be due to my own lack of skill. Also, I didn't get any other party members, but according to the store page, there are 6 characters with a maximum of 3 in battle at a time. I'm really interested to see how these other characters are, and what they add to combat with new spells or possibly even spell combos. So, all in all, I'd say this one was worth it, and I definitely want to keep playing it. Desolate is a first-person survival game with horror elements. It's set on the island of Granichny, which has suffered some sort of disaster, creating monsters and weird anomalies all over the island. There's a prologue/tutorial that you could play, which gives a little more insight into the world and why things went to hell in a handbasket. After that, it's a new game and you're thrown into it. The story seems to explore why the island is the way it is, and I would assume how to revert things back to normalcy, but that wasn't really clear. I thought the story was interesting enough and wanted to know more about what was going on. The combat felt a little janky, but I think that it's pretty much the norm for these kind of games. It didn't really bother me that much, and I thought it was better than most other games like it in its genre. I thought exploring the island was cool too. I'm a sucker for post-apocalyptic settings though. Also, there were some weird environmental anomalies that you had to keep a lookout for because they could harm you, which I thought was a nice touch to just your standard aggressive mob. Some other miscellaneous things. I really liked that on your character screen they made it easy to heal your various statuses, which was a nice quality of life feature. I thought things respawned in the world way too fast, and I actually prefer they didn't respawn back at all, at least for the inanimate objects. It just seems weird to go back into a building to find all sorts of stuff when I was just there maybe 5 minutes or so before. Also, while I did say it had a tutorial, it only covered the most basic topics. In the actual game, tutorial messages are constant, and I wish they could have just folded that into the actual gameplay tutorial. Overall, I think Desolate is an okay game. I would probably play this with my wife or a friend, but I don't know that I'd play it by myself. As far as survival games go, there are much better ones on the market. But then again, there are a lot of worse ones too. But for this bundle, I'd say it's worth a try if you like survival games. Next up, we have The Milky Way Prince, The Vampire Star, which is a visual novel that covers themes of abusive relationships and idol worship. Man, what can I say about this game, though? Well, first and foremost, I'm definitely not the target audience. I don't play visual novels at all, and I don't really play games that are purely centered on these themes either. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I guess, first, I can say that the art was good. And bad. I thought the 3D art was decent, and it actually surprised me. I didn't expect to have anything like that in a visual novel, so it was appreciated. That being said, I thought the character artwork was really bad. I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, though, but I just didn't care for them at all. The story, as it goes, follows a young man named Nuki, who is fascinated with the stars, and a story about the so-called Milky Way Prince. One day, a shooting star falls to Earth, and he goes to check it out to find another young man, who you find out is named Sune. The both of them get together over the course of the game and learn about one another through conversation and intimacy. I thought things didn't make much sense at times, but that might be solely just because emotions aren't always rational. In my hour, I actually got one of the 3 endings, so it's a fairly short game to play through if you're interested at all. This game definitely wasn't for me, as I said, so I'd say this wasn't really a game worth having in this bundle. If you like the idea of the subject matter, or visual novels in general, then maybe you'd like the Milky Way Prince. Panzer Paladin is an action platformer featuring a big mech, demons, and tons of different weapons. At first glance, you could easily tell the developers wanted to capture the nostalgia of old-school platformers. The art style is very retro-looking, but in a good way. Each of the several different levels are all designed aesthetically with a lot of care. The music also did a good job to convey that retro feeling. The main mechanic that sets it apart from others like it is its weapon system. Each weapon you pick up has different statistics and spells, making each a little different, with some better than others. Each weapon has durability, meaning that you can't just use the same thing over and over. If you throw a weapon, then you might lose it. and for checkpoints, you have to sacrifice one of your weapons. So there's a lot of deciding what weapons are best to keep for certain situations, or to use right away. I didn't get a chance to use the spells only because I didn't know how. I read from a developer talking to someone else saying that it was explained in the tutorial level, so maybe I missed it. Anyway, the spells add another layer because when you use a spell, it destroys the weapon. So some weapons you might want to save specifically for the spell, like a heal, even if it might be a good weapon to use conventionally. Another mechanic is to get out of the mech to control the pilot, which can get you into hard-to-reach areas or might just be your second chance if the mech gets destroyed. Funny enough, out of the two bosses I faced, I defeated both of them after they destroyed my mech. Basically, I just spammed the attack button on the boss and it was defeated. It seemed to be a lot harder for the boss to hurt me because I was so small, but I imagine it also was a bit of beginner's luck and that I probably fought the easiest bosses in the game. I definitely say this game is worth it. I think I expected something a bit more akin to The Messenger, but this isn't quite like it and it has a much slower pacing. It's still fun though, and I plan to return to it at some point. So next we have Stubbs the Zombie in Rebel Without a Pulse. And I'm not really sure what this is. I guess I would describe it as a 3D action adventure game. You play the role of, you guessed it, Stubbs the Zombie. And he's hungry. 4 brains. Lots and lots of brains. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure there is much of a story here, other than just causing chaos and mayhem throughout the city. There might be more to it later on, but in the playtime I gave to it, I just experienced running around the levels, eating brains, and growing a zombie horde, which was actually kind of fun. It has a lot of quirky humor in the game, which is hit or miss with me, so obviously nothing is taken too seriously, but I guess that's pretty much a given, because you're literally playing a character named Stubbs the Zombie. I'm not sure how the harder difficulties are, or what it's like later in the game, but on normal, I felt that it was pretty easy. Actually, for a while, I wasn't even using the attack button because I forgot about it, and was just using my zombies to distract the living while I snuck up behind and ate their brains. In that sense, the use of the other zombies reminded me a lot of Overlord, which was pretty much inspired by Pikmin. I think the hardest part of the game so far was the rhythm game dance-off with the police chief. Yeah, a dance-off. While this game normally wouldn't even come up on my radar, I found it to be cathartic. I actually really love games where I could just turn my brain off. Pretty sure there's a zombie joke in there somewhere. And just run around and collect things, or in this case, kill things, and not really worry about anything else. While the game is definitely dated, I'd say give it a go. This game was worth it for me, and I will probably continue playing it again sometime. Secret Neighbor is a multiplayer horror game. You play as one of several children trying to find their missing friend in your neighbor's house. Or maybe you're the neighbor disguised as one of them trying to snatch them up. I'd say the main gameplay mechanic of this is very similar to something like Among Us. However, the game reminded me a lot of Dead by Daylight too. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So, first impressions right off the bat, I'm just greeted with a lobby screen, and the only real option is to jump into the game. There isn't any in-game tutorial, but there's a question mark leading to a series of YouTube videos that they created to help new players. That is an immediate turn-off for me, but I can deal with that. I like to learn by doing, and then go back to a video or something to help fill in the gaps later. So instead, I just jumped into my first match, and was greeted with this in the first few seconds. Needless to say, I wasn't really impressed and had no idea what was going on. After a few matches, I figured out that we're trying to get key cards to open up the doors throughout the house in order to find keys. These keys are then used on the basement door to rescue your missing friend. If the kids manage to do this, then they win. And they obviously lose if the neighbor manages to catch everyone. However, the kids aren't completely defenseless because they could find other objects that could help them fend off the neighbor, or literally just start throwing anything at them. I did actually get chosen to be the neighbor once, and it wasn't fun at all. To be fair, if I knew what I was doing, then maybe it would have been more enjoyable. So I could have watched the videos, but I don't really think a game should need a bunch of videos in order to figure out how to play it. Although, I do think the players that are still playing Secret Neighbor are probably only hardcore fans of the game who are really good. Looking at the Steam charts, it barely gets about 200 players per month, which isn't really good, especially since it was just given in a bundle. All in all, I'd say if you want a good multiplayer horror game, then just play Dead by Daylight. If you want a multiplayer game with a traitor mechanic, then probably Among Us. Don't bother with this one unless you have a bunch of friends who really like the idea of the game, or were fans of Hello Neighbor, the studio's single-player experience. Bundle's headliner for the month is Civilization VI, a turn-based 4X strategy game that spans the course of human history. I'm not really sure what to say about this game that most people probably don't already know about, but I guess in terms of Civilization VI specifically, it makes a few changes from its predecessors. The biggest ones being the Eureka system and city districts. Eurekas are boosts to technologies, or civics, that you can get by doing various things, the caveat being that it's all dynamic to your current situation. So something you do in one playthrough, you might not get around to doing for a while, or at all in another playthrough. The idea is it might change your playstyle now that a tech might look more appealing because it takes less time to research. The district system also plays into this idea. It expands on cities through the creation of specific districts on tiles, such as a military encampment or a holy district, but these districts can get more bonuses based on appropriate terrain. For instance, a campus district gets bonuses by being next to a mountain. To further this, wonders have even stricter placement requirements, which forces the player to think about what their city can or can't build. These changes shake up the formula so that players don't follow the same patterns game to game. That may sound like a lot to think about, and I suppose it is. To be honest though, I don't really ever think about it and just go with whatever I feel I need at the time. Probably why I can only play this game on Prince or King difficulties. I'm not really that good. This Platinum Edition also includes a bunch of other civs to play, as well as providing Rise and Fall and Gathering Storm, the two main DLC expansions. Each adds in new systems for the player. In Rise and Fall, you have the Era system, which tracks everything you do and at the end of an era determines whether or not you enter a Golden Age or fall into a Dark Age, or just continue on as normal. And Gathering Storm adds in natural disasters that can provide benefits or consequences to you or other civilizations, and it factors in global warming, which could have ramifications in the late game if left unchecked. If you're a fan of turn-based strategy games and you haven't played Civilization VI for some reason, then by all means definitely play this one. The last two games in the bundle that I didn't talk about yet are Going Under and Worms Rumble. Unfortunately, since I live in Japan, I couldn't redeem these keys for some reason, so I don't have any actual hands-on experience with them. From what I could tell, Going Under is a roguelike dungeon crawler that seems to have a humorous take on corporate life. It's very colorful and has a lot of different weapons from swords to guitars. To be honest, I wasn't really into the art style of the game and didn't really care that I couldn't redeem the key. But from what I hear from other reviewers, and even its Steam rating, all seems to suggest that it's a great game. So if you're into these kinds of games, or you're attracted to the humorous elements it has, then this will probably be a good game for you. Lastly, we have Worms Rumble. I wouldn't even bother with this one at all. So basically, it's supposed to be a real-time version of the popular Worms franchise, and you just fight in a team deathmatch from the looks of it. Maybe if you have a bunch of friends and you like the franchise, then you might get some enjoyment out of it. As it stands, it only gets about 20 or so players monthly on the Steam charts, which can't even fill a match in the game. So, not even worth the install if you ask me. Okay, so we reached the end of the video. So let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing, on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. I feel that with most games, an hour should be enough to determine if it's something I'd like. and I'm really judging their worth as to whether I feel you should invest any time into said game. And overall, I'd say this bundle is worth it. Obviously, if you're interested in Civilization 6 and don't own it yet for some reason, then the bundle solely for that game alone makes it worth it. But for the rest of the games, I feel it's a weak recommendation. All of these games were basically as expected for me and didn't particularly blow me away. Setting aside Civ 6, I'd say probably the most standout title in this bundle was Ikenfell. I really want to continue exploring and see more of the story. After that, I think some easy recommendations to try are Panzer Paladin and Stubbs the Zombie. I'm throwing Going Under with them only because of the glowing ratings other people have given it. For Desolate, Disjunction, and Effie, I think those are worth a try as long as you have an interest in the type of game that they are. And while you could argue the same for the last 4 in the bundle, I'd say just stay away from them. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I hope this helped you in some way. If you enjoyed what you saw, then please feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks again, and have a nice day.